Social media trends that you definitely want to know about. The impact of social media on both our mental health as well as our financial health, and some updates on interest rates and inflation. Welcome back to the Hairdresser Strong News. And what does it have to do with you? I get on here on a regular basis, call it, maybe a couple times a month, and I talk about the news that's important to you, your clients, and your business. All right. So if you're just tuning in and you're on YouTube, then you are looking at a picture of an article on Fast Company. I'm just going to dive right in. So, if you're on podcast, don't worry. You can use the links below to follow along, do your own research. And this is not financial advice. But don't worry, I'll be keeping you. I'll let you know everything that you're looking at on the screen if you're on podcast. All right, let's get started. So the first topic is social media. So this was released on July 25th. It's titled "De-influencing effectively sways 69% of U.S. social media users." The trend of social media users revolting against influencers has made an impact on consumer buying habits, and it might be just the beginning. So I'm just going to read a little bit here to let you all know what's going on. So far more trends on TikTok end up becoming more mere blimps than full-on movements. So that's interesting. So like a trend on TikTok is most likely a trend for you to make content in that moment, but not necessarily like part of your social media marketing strategy. Influencers help spread the latest craze far and wide before inevitably moving on to a new fixation. Today's mob wife aesthetic turning into tomorrow's that time everyone was super into sea shanties for some reason. One of the top TikTok trends of 2023 is still going strong, however. It's a movement plenty of influencers probably wish would have just been a blimp. The de-influencing trend, a rejection of the most blatantly consumerist aspects of influencer culture, undoubtedly has legs. So basically, there's a whole movement to call out influencers BS. And we've seen that starting like BS in terms of like authenticity. Do you truly believe in the brand that you're promoting, or are you just getting a paycheck and promoting this brand because they're the brand that is paying you the best, or who knows, maybe that's the only brand that would pay you? Well, I do think that that's a real thing. I think that if you've been building a following and you want to monetize that following, it makes sense that you might agree to do something that you don't believe in your heart. And that's an unfortunate reality of business. People trying to make money off of all this work that they're doing. And um, so yeah. So anyway, I scrolled down here to the bottom of this article. The de-influencer trend driving consumers instead toward austerity seems to have connected most with Gen Z. According to the study, a whopping 88% of social media users in that demographic have been de-influenced. While the top contributing factors for all respondents is a trust issue with social media shills, 38% of Gen Z respondents cited overconsumption as their primary motivation. Perhaps that's why so many people in that age range appear in videos promoting a more recent trend, one that grows out of de-influencing is underconsumption core. So basically why this is important: one, you might want to depending on what you use your social media for, this might be a trend that could potentially attract other followers. But it also is important to understand that austerity and spending less money and giving in to gimmicky sales pitches and stuff is not an advised strategy. Based on That's how I'm reading this. So let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear from you. I also think that we're seeing this happen in our industry with a lot of social media educators being called out for maybe not being that great at educating. Um, and also like people using their social media platform to create products and sell them when the products might not be any more unique than the brand that's on top of it. But, I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying that these are the things I've heard. If you have a following and you're selling stuff to monetize your following, then I'd love to hear from you. How are you doing it? How are you doing in a way that maintains authenticity? I'd love to hear from you. I even love to interview you, or do you get you on live? Okay, so let's keep moving so we don't make this a super long news update. So we got this is CNBC. This is from July 23rd. Young people today are stressed, depressed, and changing the fundamental patterns of happiness, new research shows. This is by Renee On Q. And sorry if I mispronounced that name. So this is on CNBC, and it's the article. This is from David Blanchflower, a professor of economics at Dartmouth, says the U-shaped happiness curve dictates that happiness rises initially to a peak around 30 and then declines into midlife and then rises again after 70. So all basically they're saying that all young people under 30 should be happy, and then from 30 it's a downhill from there. I don't agree with that. I personally, but this is the data. It says that it's gone hundreds of studies since the early 70s, and many countries show the same pattern. So this is not just a US thing. I'm gonna scroll down here. I'm gonna read you an excerpt. Experts agree social media has negative impact on youth happiness. I mean, what else could it be? I don't know. Maybe the world's getting worse and more unhappy based on other stuff. I'd love to hear your opinion, but listen to this. Blanchflower says he isn't exactly sure why young adults seem to be experiencing the most unhappiness, but notes the downward trend began before the COVID pandemic. So don't blame COVID. The only potential factor Blanchflower was able to identify is the prevalence of social media and smartphones. So, duh, I talk a lot about that. If we take a zoom back perspective, we think about war, the associated humanitarian crises, especially the humanitarian crises of late, and most of these crises within the past 20 or 30 years have been multiplying. This is a clinical psychologist and associate professor in Department of Psychiatry at Yale. So that's what they're saying. Now, a lot of folks here we go. Um, she says that considers how high school and college commencement speeches are leaning more towards themes of the world needing students. So like students, people are going to school, they're hearing like, oh, the world needs you. We need to make the world a better place. But then they're thinking like, well, how am I going to afford to pay for my college? How am I going to afford what I've just done? How am I going to buy a home? So there's all these like, oh, all this pressure, like the world is like worse. Well, there's also a greater access to information, that gives you makes you more informed, being more informed about what's going on in the world and realizing that the world and humans can, it can be a messy and scary and sad place. And so if you have more access to that, more people are amplifying that message, especially the people who are being hurt by that, what, are suffering. It makes sense that, being more aware of what's going on in the world. And then according to this person saying that those crises are not just we're not more informed, but they're also more of them. So it would make sense that people are more stressed out. And, so social media, if you take out social media, is that going to help? I'm not saying that, but this is what they're saying. So I only brought this up, and if this is you and you are experiencing less happiness and you are one of these people that are struggling, I recommend you click this link and check out it says how young adults can start to experience more happiness now, and there's some advice. I recommend you check this out. But it says decide what your values are and structure your behaviors to align with them. Become more aware of unhelpful comparisons and use comparison for your benefit. So they do talk about comparisons in this article. So it's a good article. If this is like an interest to you, I recommend you check it out. This is really interesting conversation to have with your customers, especially those who are younger, to hear what they think about it, or people who have children, especially if you don't. To hear what they have to say. And then last night, it says focus on reducing stress levels. I think some of this is like really easy to say and harder to do. But if you have something that works for you, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about this. And I'm going to move on to the next Next and final topic that's related to social media, but also segues us into economic and financial news. This is on Business Insider of India. And yes, it says India, but this is macro news. This isn't just related to India. And this is something that is transcending lines, just like social media does. So don't think that this is not relevant to you here in the US. So, why so many Gen Zers and millennials have money dysmorphia, even if they are financially better off than they realize, by Julia Pugachevsky. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit from here for you. Gen Z has more job flexibility and access to information about money than their parents did. Still, not everyone feels good about their financial futures. In fact, Gen Zers, people born between 97 and 2012, are more worried about saving than any other generation, according to a Business Insider survey. And not all of it's tied to inflation or student loan debt. Money dysmorphia is a negative and unrealistic perception of one's financial wellness or financial position. This is according to Amanda Clayman, a financial therapist. And let's see, she says that nearly half of Gen Zers and millennials have it. So about half of us, I'm a millennial, have half of us have money dysmorphia, thinking the worse off than we are. Money dysmorphia goes beyond wanting to pay off some credit card debt or to contribute to your 401k. It's pervasive worry, vigilance, like an internalized feeling of unsafety with money. So I've talked on a similar theme like this, where I truly believe that social media has some of the biggest impacts that we don't talk about. Like, for example, the narrative that Gen Z will never be able to buy a house. You can pull up any chart you want and show me that the purchasing power relative to assets adjusted to inflation, because that basically, if you want to see what baby boomers, what they had and their opportunities was, you have to like say, okay, if they were making $100,000 a year and houses were $200,000 a year, and then inflation made the same $100,000 worth $50,000, and that house is now $400,000. Well, then that sounds like it's going to be a lot harder for you to buy a house. So you could bring up those charts, but what the and say, well, that's true. But what I'm here to say is, if you tell a child that they're incompetent or stupid every day, over and over and over again, I do you think that they're going to grow up to have confidence issues? I would say I think you're crazy if you don't. So like, at the end of the day, manifestation is a real thing. Like, you can like externally say things and speak to yourself or hear things about yourself over and over and over again, especially more impactful if you're in a more impressionable time of your life. So like, psychologically, it totally makes sense that if you hear that you have less opportunity, then you will be able to take advantage of less opportunity, even if there is more opportunity than you think there is. That's how I understand this. I would love to hear if you disagree with me. But at the end of the day, I'm about to tell you some other things here. So, like, I've talked in the past about like a recent Bank of America survey talking about how Gen Z has adjusted their spending habits. They're no longer buying like the expensive pastries and coffees to post on social media, or spending money because they're like, hey, what's the point in saving because I can never buy a home? Over 60% of them have changed that perspective. I've always said like half of that generation or more is in the workforce. So if you are Gen Z listening to this, how do you feel about money? Do you feel like you have no chances, or do you feel like, if you work hard and you save and you might have to grind a little more and you might have more room to cover, but do you believe have a successful perspective or view of the future when it comes to your money? I would love to hear from you. If you do not, I would also like to have you come on and the show, or at least leave a comment below or message us on Instagram at the Hairdresser Strong Show. But this is a really interesting thing because I think that this pours over into everything. I think this pours over into why cosmetology school students want to go into a suite. I think that, social media, whether it's social media influences in our industry or just the general concept of entrepreneurship and being your own boss is so much more prevalent, which I love. And so what I don't love is that the information is imperfect and in part and incomplete because the information that people are getting is lacking the steps it takes to get to success. And we tend to just focus on when we fail or when we succeed. We don't focus on the work that it takes to get there. So anyway, moving on, I'll digress here. I'm going up in a tangent. I just watched it take 3 minutes, so let me keep moving. All right, so here we go. Self-comparison fuels money dysmorphia. We just talked about that, but also they're talking about big life transitions. So depending on where you are in your life, you might have more things that you're thinking about spending or saving up for. They mention here a wedding, house, career change, family. So that'll put mounted pressure on us. Like I'm thinking about all those things currently, and so I get it. And we also budgeting here was simpler when we didn't have clutter and credit card points. I don't know about that, but it was easier maybe, or maybe it was less confusing. Our money is less scattered back in the day. Also, previous generations want to compare their money situations to us, and you know I think that that's an interesting because like they had pensions before and now there's no pensions. Like you have to, well, I mean there might be a pension if you're a police officer or fire, but like you have to self-fund your own retirement account. The things are different, so we can't compare ourselves to the previous generations quite the same, but we can say that we do have more ground to cover. That sucks, but like we should be strategizing for how to cover that ground, not sitting back and being like, oh, poor me, I have it worse than the previous generation. I'm just going to complain about it and spend frivolously because that's not smart money. So, all right, so here we go. High social media use is linked to lower moods. Well, we just talked about that, so we know. So you see how all these things are connecting now. And those who spend more time on TikTok might be served more content that confirms their negative self-belief. So if you're spending a lot of time on social media, which you're probably consuming this on social media, I mean, maybe, if you spend less time on it, you should not feel as negative if that's how you feel in general. And they're saying that's because you have less of those information coming at you. You can get out and do other things, consume different types of information, maybe more positive information, maybe hang out with your friends or meditate or read a book, listen to my podcast. So anyway, it says, all we have to do is open Instagram, be flooded with confirmation that there are lots of people out there who are having fun and going places, except for the couple with the dream wedding might have been using it, put it all on their credit card. But they also might have a trust fund. We will never know the intimate details of a person's financial picture and their history. Constantly being bombarded with images of luxury restaurants, impeccable homes, and beautiful pastries and interesting baklava coffee and stuff like that. All right, there's an entire business industry that was created to appeal to people's ability to take pictures of their food. So, I mean, that right there, it just tells you it's like we're being influenced heavily. And this de-influencing trend that I talked about earlier, well, that's a good thing, I think. So what do you think? If more people are distrusting what they see on social media, then perhaps there's a little bit of a pushback against it and people can get into more healthy habits. All right, so here we go. Last but not least, I'm going to wrap this up. The Wall Street Journal. Childcare, rent, insurance, where inflation hits hardest now. Big fixed costs that are tough to avoid are crushing household budgets. This was a couple days ago by Harriet Torrey and Terrell Wright, and this is in the Wall Street Journal. And I'm just going to read a little bit here. Inflation is slowing, so why doesn't it feel that way? After all, price increases for lots of items like cable and shampoo are indeed cooling. Prices for vehicles, gasoline, TVs, and plane tickets have dropped, and the overall pace year over year is coming down to 3%. much lower than it was at 9% only a couple years ago. But prices for many of things that are hard to do without are still posting eye-watering increases. Rent and electricity are up 10% or more over the past 2 years, and car insurance costs are up nearly 40%. Shoppers might be able to trade down from prime steak or to cheaper cuts of beef at the supermarket, but they can't really do the same thing with their water bill. And then if you're on listening on podcasts, I'm currently looking at a chart that shows the continued rise of prices and inflation, and this is an upward trend, my friends. This is a constantly flowing upward trend. So no matter what, this is always going to be going up. It just is super painful still because we're still reeling from the quick increase in prices that we experienced during COVID. Okay, so I just want to say, like, this is really important to understand your customers, your pricing. Do you know your customers? What is your demographic? What is their certain scenario? We talked about austerity coming from de-influencing, and we talked about, people have a negative view of their finances. All of these, and then we have this inflation information. All these things point to, I've created the ultimate bargain hunters. We have a growing nation of bargain hunters and value hunters here. So this is why all this is really important. So if any of your customers are experiencing any of this, this is going to straight up appeal to you and them. So when daycare is a second mortgage, I just wanted to read this piece because, families with young children are also paying high prices for childcare. It says costs have risen 6.4% over the past 2 years, in line with overall CPI. Because daycare bills can be as big as the rent payment or the mortgage, even a relatively small increase can feel like a lot. The median price to put an infant in center-based care in 2022 was more than $1,400 a month in major metro areas. A 6.4% increase puts that closer to $1,500. That is huge. So if your customers are not don't all have black cards, then you might want to be paying attention to this, and you too might be feeling this. So just know that your customers are too. I'm not saying cut your prices. Okay. I'm just saying, one of the trends right now is for people to create discounts and stuff like that, or not discounts, sorry, package deals or seasonal deals. It drives traffic into the shop and keeps you top of mind and lets them know that they don't have to break the bank every time they come. Let me know if you're doing anything like that or if you hate that advice. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, I got 2 videos, 3 minutes, and we're gonna be done. Okay, so this first one is 80 seconds. There we go.
Good afternoon. Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. We are maintaining our restrictive stance of monetary policy in order to keep demand in line with supply and reduce inflationary pressures. The question will be whether the totality of the data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks are consistent with rising confidence on inflation and maintaining a solid labor market. If that test is met, a reduction in our policy rate could be on the table as soon as the next meeting in September. So you asked why not today, and I would just say again that the broad sense of the committee is that we're getting closer to the point at which it will be appropriate to reduce our policy rate, but that we're not quite at that point yet. We want to see more good data. The decision was unanimous. All 19 participants supported it. But there was a real discussion back and forth of what the case would be for moving at this meeting. A strong majority supported not moving at this meeting. That was the strong sense of the committee. But it's a conversation that we had today.
Okay, so that's Jay Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, our central bank. They set the interest rates and as well as the money supply. So the money supply got super inflated, and because of COVID, I mean, it's been inflating since before COVID, but that's a whole other conversation. But significant amount of money was printed. They say that if you go in your wallet and you have 5 $1 bills, one of them was printed in the last 4 years, 5 years. So that's why you have experienced so much inflation more than any other reason. So what he's saying is they're not quite ready to cut the rates yet because they don't think inflation is ready to be cut back yet. And so yeah, that means it's going to be hard to expand your business, open a new business, buy a house. Everyone's budgeting, everyone's looking for deals, and money is slowing down. Like people are spending, or the spending is slowing down. And so where does this train go? No one knows, but here's the last minute. This is 2 minutes and we're out. This is sorry. This is ABC News talking about fresh inflation data to show if cool down has continued.
The economy. The latest report on inflation is due out this morning. Chief Economics Correspondent Rebecca Jarvis here with a preview and the economic warning from one of the nation's largest retailers. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning to you, George. And this is a key report that will determine what the Federal Reserve does when it meets in September and whether it lowers interest rates for the first time in over 4 years. While consumers and businesses are still stretched by prices considerably higher than they were 3 years ago, the rate of price increases has slowed dramatically, and economists believe inflation in July was unchanged from June, 3% higher than it was a year ago. Not quite the Fed's target 2% rate, but a signal that there is a good chance of a rate cut, an interest rate cut next month. Where prices are likely falling: new and used cars, airfare, shelter has been one of the biggest drivers of inflation, and last month it started slowing. Some economists predict that could continue. Meantime, auto insurance is one of those areas still expected to rise. It's going up still, George.
And Rebecca, we have that possible recession warning from Home Depot.
Yeah, very much attention being paid to this warning. Obviously, Home Depot is an incredibly important retailer. They serve so much of the economy, and consumer sentiment has been mixed despite what has continued to be a relatively healthy economy. When you look at the jobs rate, unemployment still near its lowest in many, many years. And you also have issues like the housing market. That's still at a bit of a standstill. So with this question of where interest rates go next, Home Depot is predicting that it will take time before people start engaging in home improvement because the housing market has been at such a standstill. They have seen their business slow down. Once interest rates start to drop, again predicted to happen next month, they could see the housing market start to pick up more as more people decide to list their homes because they actually have more buyers out there who are interested, because those buyers, George, can get access to mortgages that are far more affordable than they have been.
The economy. The latest report on inflation is due out.
So I think that she did an even better job than I did explaining the importance of inflation to your customers. You know, you might feel a certain way about your own financial situation, but at the end of the day, this is about not only about your life, business, and community, but it's also about your customers. So hopefully that was informative. Remember, none of this is any sort of financial advice. I just want to keep you informed, and I curate it so that you understand how I see it. And if you see it differently, I want to hear from you. I really do. I really do. I think dialogue around this kind of stuff is way more important than me being able to come on here and give you good information. I mean, obviously it's good information if you think that my sources are good. And so I want to hear from you. So anyway, have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.